The crisp December air in Nulta village, Panipat, was thick with the scent of marigolds and celebration. The house of Satpal was a fortress of joy, preparing for a double wedding. His daughter's Bharat was due to arrive on November 30th, and his son's Bharat was set to leave on December 1st. Every relative, friend, and neighbor was swept up in the whirlwind of music, laughter, and traditional ceremonies. The sheer size of the family gathering, documented in 1,000 photographs and videos, painted a scene of idyllic familial warmth. No one could have predicted that this festive noise was about to mask the silent, horrifying act that would forever stain the memories of this ancestral home, ripping the tapestry of happiness to shreds and revealing a pattern of darkness few dared to contemplate. This perfect, noisy celebration was the ideal camouflage for a monster to strike without detection. Among the guests was the family of Pal Singh, a respected retired sub-inspector from the Haryana police, who had traveled from Sonipat's West Ramnagar. His son, Sandeep, his daughter-in-law, Rakhi, and their 2 children, 6-year-old Vidhi, or Sona, as the family lovingly called her, and 1-year-old Divya, were soaking in the joyous atmosphere. Vidhi was a shining presence, her eyes bright with the excitement of the festivities, dressed in her best clothes, running through the crowded rooms with other children. The family was affluent, well-respected, and deeply connected. On the afternoon of December 1st, as the son's wedding procession was leaving the house around 1:30 p.m., the core members of the family, including Pal Singh and Sandeep, departed, leaving behind a group of women and children to manage the house and follow later. The mood, still buoyant, began to subtly shift around 2 p.m. It was time for a small ritual where elders distributed shagun, cash, and sweets to all the children. Vidhi's grandmother, Omwati, called out for her, urging the 6-year-old to come and receive her gift. All the other children quickly assembled, their hands outstretched, but Vidhi was nowhere to be seen. Initially, it was a moment of minor irritation, the kind of small chaos common in a bustling wedding house. "Sona, where are you hiding?" Omwati called again, her voice slightly sharper. The search began casually, progressing from the kitchen to the courtyard, and then to the maze of bedrooms where guests were resting. The seconds stretched into minutes, and the joyous anticipation of the shagun ritual dissolved into a quiet, creeping anxiety. The anxiety soon escalated into full-blown panic. A child is missing in a house full of people. How is this possible? Calls were frantically made to the cars that had just departed, checking if Vidhi had somehow snuck into a vehicle with her father or grandfather. But the answer was a resounding, chilling no. The retired policeman, Pal Singh, and his son, Sandeep, were contacted and immediately turned their cars around, the wedding celebration instantly forgotten. Back at the house, the remaining relatives began tearing through every inch of the property. The music died down, the laughter ceased. The wedding house, moments ago a symbol of happiness, became a gaping, echoing chamber of fear. Every cupboard was checked, every bed lifted, and every curtain pulled back, but the little girl was gone as if swallowed by the celebratory air. The desperate search led them to the upper floor, an area typically less frequented during the daytime rush. Near the terrace, tucked away, was a small, dusty storeroom usually used for stacking luggage and miscellaneous items. One of the searching relatives forced the door open, and what they found instantly froze the blood of every person who saw it. Inside the small, confined space, 6-year-old Vidhi was lying motionless. Her head was submerged in a small, portable water tub that had been sitting on the floor. The sight was so immediate and so devastating that the room exploded in screams, a cacophony of sorrow that pierced the heart of the village, ensuring the returning Bharat would be met not with welcome, but with the wails of unimaginable grief. The initial shock gave way to the horrifying realization. Vidhi was dead. A local doctor was summoned who confirmed the immediate cause of death as drowning, noting water in her nose and mouth. The wedding house was instantly transformed into a crime scene, the brightly colored dupattas and garlands now stark against the cold reality of tragedy. But the crime scene itself told a bizarre story that defied the simple explanation of a tragic accident. Pal Singh, the former police officer, immediately sensed something was deeply wrong. A child of Vidhi's age does not accidentally drown in a shallow tub of water. And more disturbingly, the door to the storeroom was reportedly bolted from the outside. This was not an accident. This was calculated. When the police arrived, they faced a scene of profound chaos, grief, and confusion. They began their investigation by questioning the dozens of relatives present. Who saw Vidhi last? Who had access to the upper floor? The family members were drowning in their own sorrow, unable to process how such an unspeakable act could occur in the protective embrace of their own home, surrounded by loved ones. The investigators noted the placement of the tub. It was not in a bathroom where a child might wander, but in a locked storeroom. They meticulously documented the bizarre details that Pal Singh had already noticed, confirming his worst fears. The locked door was the first undeniable crack in the facade of this accidental drowning, suggesting a deliberate, cold-blooded act of isolation and murder. The police had barely begun processing the shock of Vidhi's death when the first chilling whispers began to circulate among the grieving relatives. They spoke of a shadow that seemed to follow this extended family, a bizarre, recurring tragedy that had struck not just once but multiple times in the preceding years. "It's the curse," some muttered, while others spoke of inexplicable accidents. The sheer unlikelihood of 4 separate drowning deaths within such a close-knit family began to loom over the investigation, suggesting that Vidhi's death was not an isolated incident, but the horrifying crescendo of a dark, uninvestigated pattern. This single tragic wedding day was about to unlock a history of unexplained deaths that the police had previously dismissed. The detective leading the case, recognizing the profound significance of the locked door and the victim's age, knew immediately that this was far more than a simple tragic mishap. This was a deliberate act committed by someone who understood the logistics of the house and the routines of the family. The person who murdered Vidhi was someone who could move silently through the crowded corridors, lure a 6-year-old without a struggle, and then lock the door behind them, all while the noise of wedding drums drowned out any possibility of a cry for help. The realization was terrifying. The killer wasn't an outsider but a guest, a relative, and perhaps even someone still standing among the mourners. The weight of this possibility, that the perpetrator was a loved one, forced the police to expand their scope immediately. Vidhi's body was sent for a post-mortem, and a murder case was officially registered, sending a shockwave through the community. The investigation now shifted from determining how Vidhi died to identifying who was capable of such cold-blooded cruelty within the family circle. The answers the police suspected lay hidden in the past, buried under the convenient label of accidental tragedy. The police were about to pull the thread of Vidhi's case, knowing it might unravel the entire dark history of the family. The biggest question remained: if Vidhi's death was murder, what really happened to the other children in the family who had perished in water-related accidents over the last few years? The investigation into Vidhi's murder was instantly elevated, turning the focus away from a random intruder toward the dozens of people who had been celebrating in the house that day. The initial interviews were frustratingly useless. Everyone was grieving and no one claimed to have seen anything. The police were left with the contradictions of the crime scene: a locked storeroom, a tiny tub, and a child who showed no signs of struggle, implying she either knew her attacker or was overpowered swiftly. It was the retired sub-inspector Pal Singh who provided the crucial initial direction. insisting that the circumstances were too improbable to be accidental. This murder was not a standalone incident. It was meticulously planned, suggesting a motive and a level of calculation that terrified the investigators. But it still didn't give them a suspect within the tight-knit family circle, forcing them to look backward in time. As the police pressed the family for any previous unexplained tragedies, the truth began to ooze out, slowly at first, then in a torrent of repressed grief. The relatives recounted the horrifying incident from 2 years prior. January 2023. This time the victims were Sandeep's cousin Naveen's children, 3-year-old Shubham and 9-year-old Ishika, who were found drowned together in an open water tank on the roof of their home in Bawar village, Sonipat. The deaths had been heartbreaking but classified as a tragic accident. 2 children playing near a water tank who somehow fell in. At the time, Naveen's wife, Poonam, Vidhi's mommy or aunt by marriage, who was also related through marriage to the victims, had become severely distressed, exhibiting strange and unnerving behavior which the family had sadly dismissed as the trauma of dealing with death. The investigators' blood ran cold when they realized the common thread was not just the family name, but the modus operandi: death by drowning in a small, accessible water container. But the pattern didn't end there. A third, equally baffling tragedy had occurred just months before Vidhi's death, in August of the previous year. 4-year-old Jia, Poonam's cousin's daughter, was found dead in a large water storage container, Haud, at Poonam's maternal home in Sewa village, Panipat, where Poonam was staying at the time. 3 separate accidental drownings, 3 innocent children, and 1 central person, Poonam, was present at all 3 locations, a fact that was too statistically terrifying to ignore. The police now had 4 deaths and a single recurring shadow, forcing them to officially connect the dots between the Panipat wedding tragedy and the 2 prior incidents in Sonipat. Poonam, who was present at the wedding, was immediately flagged as a person of extreme interest. The police began to interview other female relatives who were in the house, asking about her movements, her demeanor, and any subtle oddities they may have dismissed during the chaos. That is when a crucial detail emerged. Several women reported seeing Poonam descending the stairs from the upper floor just minutes after Vidhi's disappearance, her clothes notably wet. When confronted, she offered vague and contradictory excuses: spilled milk, period blood, a hurried shower, explanations that seemed plausible in the moment of chaos but now screamed of concealment. The combination of the wet clothes, her presence at all 4 death sites, and her strange behavior in the past elevated her from a grieving relative to the prime suspect in the entire string of family tragedies. The police decided to shift their focus from direct interrogation to cold, undeniable evidence. They seized the CCTV footage from the wedding house, hoping it would either exonerate Poonam or provide the final damning piece of the puzzle. The footage was meticulous. It showed 6-year-old Vidhi running up the stairs alone minutes before her disappearance. Then, less than a minute later, the footage clearly captured Poonam following her up the same staircase. The camera, positioned at the bottom of the landing, waited. After a short, agonizing interval, Poonam reappeared, swiftly descending the stairs, alone. Vidhi was not with her. This single, silent sequence of video footage confirmed the police's most terrifying hypothesis. Poonam was the last person to see Vidhi alive, and she had deliberately lured the girl to the storeroom. With the circumstantial evidence, the locked door, the tub, the wet clothes, and the CCTV, the police officially took Poonam in for formal questioning. During the first round of interrogation, she maintained an unnervingly composed facade. She answered every question confidently, maintaining her innocence, sticking to her vague alibis, and even playing the role of the grieving relative who had been unfairly targeted. She was highly educated, having a master's degree in political science and a B.Ed, which gave her a sharp, calculated way of speaking, easily deflecting the subtle pressure applied by the police. The investigating officer recognized her intelligence and realized that simply shouting accusations would not break her. They needed a deeper psychological approach to crack the composure of this highly articulate suspect. The police began to dig into her background, finding disturbing stories of her deteriorating mental state after the death of her niece and nephew, Ishika and Shubham. Relatives spoke of her suddenly talking in strange voices, speaking to the spirit of a deceased young man in the neighborhood, and exhibiting bouts of deep, paralyzing jealousy. Most notably, they spoke of her intense sensitivity about her own son, Divya, whom people had sometimes compared unfavorably to her own striking beauty. This was a critical lead, confirming the police's emerging profile of a suspect driven by a pathological need for attention and a severe underlying personality disorder, far exceeding the typical domestic jealousy they often encountered. The investigators decided on a tactical psychological play. They brought up the past tragedies, showing her photos of Ishika, Shubham, and Jia, pressing her on the similarities to Vidhi's death. They highlighted the impossible luck of one family having so many water-related tragedies. They then employed a powerful bluff, hinting that they had found a witness who saw her with Vidhi, and that her DNA was found in the locked storeroom, an outright lie designed to exploit her calculation. The composure she had maintained throughout the day finally began to chip away, and a flicker of deep underlying paranoia crossed her eyes. The detective leaned in, emphasizing that this was her last chance to tell the truth and explain the pattern of tragedy that had haunted the family for years. In the small, sterile room, Poonam finally wavered. The weight of the 3 previous unpunished murders combined with the irrefutable CCTV evidence of Vidhi's last moments became too much to bear. She broke down, her polished demeanor dissolving into racking sobs, not of remorse but of release. The police knew that the truth about Vidhi was about to open the door to a much larger, darker reality. They had started with a single wedding day murder, but they were now on the verge of uncovering a horrific secret that had festered in the heart of the family for over 2 years, resulting in the deaths of multiple children. The officers prepared themselves for the confession, knowing that the motive, when it finally emerged, would be something utterly beyond their comprehension. This was no crime of passion or financial gain. The motive was hidden deep within the suspect's fractured psyche. The woman who had just confessed to drowning a 6-year-old girl in a tub of water had been present at 3 other child deaths, yet the police were still missing the most critical piece of information. If she had murdered all 4 children, what was the dark, compelling force that drove this educated, seemingly normal relative to systematically execute the innocent children of her own family? The interrogation room was cold, but the air was thick with the chilling details of Poonam's confession. Once the psychological dam broke, the secrets poured out, not just about Vidhi, but about every child that had died under mysterious circumstances in the preceding 2 years. The police were stunned as she calmly admitted to the murders of 9-year-old Ishika and 3-year-old Shubham in 2023, and 4-year-old Jia in August, leading up to Vidhi's murder in December. 4 children, 4 separate incidents, all at different locations and all victims of a single highly educated woman who carried a terrifying secret. She was a serial killer, and her victims were her own family. The realization was a staggering blow to the entire investigation, transforming a single case of domestic homicide into one of India's most disturbing true crime stories of maternal and familial betrayal. The sheer premeditation and coldness of the acts were revealed in the logistics of the murders. Poonam described luring the children one by one, capitalizing on her trusted status as an older relative, taking them to secluded spots, the rooftop water tank, the water storage hood, the storeroom tub, and then holding their heads under the water until their struggles ceased. When asked why she chose water, her answer was chillingly simple. She would watch the air bubbles rise to the surface. As long as the bubbles were coming up, she felt the horrifying thrill of knowing the victim was still alive and struggling. When the bubbles stopped, she knew the job was done. This detail confirmed a profound psychological pathology, painting a picture of a killer who derived a perverse sense of control and dark satisfaction from the final moments of her victims. The police finally probed the motive, and the answer was more shocking than any financial or revenge-driven plot they had considered. Poonam's killings were fueled by extreme pathological narcissism and a severe beauty complex. She confessed that she harbored an intense destructive hatred for any child she perceived as beautiful or too smart, seeing them as future rivals who would eclipse her own looks and status within the family. Her mind saw their burgeoning beauty as a threat to her own standing, believing they would grow up to attract more attention than she did. This warped insecurity had escalated into a psychotic compulsion, turning her into the beautiful monster who systematically eliminated anyone she saw as a potential usurper to her imagined throne of domestic perfection. The confession extended to her own son Shubham and the attempted murder of Vidhi 2 years earlier. In 2021, she had poured a kettle of boiling hot tea on a 2-year-old Vidhi's face, a horrific incident her father, Sonipat, had desperately tried to rationalize as a tragic accident. Vidhi survived the scalding, but not her aunt's second successful attempt. As for her own son Shubham, she murdered him not because he was beautiful, but because he was an accidental witness to the murder of his sister Ishika. The police also learned that when family members had casually commented that Shubham was not as handsome as his mother, the perceived slight had driven her to murder him, compounding her own twisted belief system and eliminating a child who failed to reflect her own warped standards of perfection. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community and media, who quickly dubbed the case the Snow White murder, referencing the tale of the evil queen whose obsession with being the fairest of them all drove her to dark deeds. The family, decimated by the truth, was left in a state of compounded grief, realizing they had welcomed a serial killer into their homes, allowing 4 children to die because they had blindly trusted her and dismissed her crimes as simple, tragic accidents. The collective failure to question the pattern, 3 water-related deaths in 2 years, now stood as a monumental testament to the darkness that can hide behind the facade of familial love and normalcy. The police, armed with the full confession and the confirmed pattern of modus operandi, formally added the 3 historical cases to Poonam's file, transforming the wedding day murder into the culmination of a horrifying killing spree. Family members rallied, demanding the harshest possible punishment for a woman who had so profoundly betrayed every standard of kinship and trust. They spoke of the need for lifetime confinement, ensuring this monster would never again walk free to prey on the innocent. The case was a brutal awakening for society about the hidden dangers of psychological illness and the terrifying reality that not all monsters dwell in the shadows. Some are relatives, present at every family gathering. Poonam, the educated, seemingly composed relative, now stood as one of India's most notorious female serial killers, her legacy cemented in the silent tragedies of 4 innocent children. Her case revealed how severe narcissistic personality disorder combined with intense jealousy can override maternal instinct and familial bonds. Her downfall was ultimately her own overconfidence in the one small detail she failed to cover: the CCTV footage and the testimony of her wet clothes after Vidhi's murder. The family's tragedy forced an uncomfortable societal confrontation with the concept of psychopathy hiding in plain sight. The resolution, though bringing a degree of justice, could not heal the deep wounds left on the family's soul. Vidhi's mother, Rakhi, took on the burden of caring for the surviving child, Divya, protecting him from the psychological fallout of the family's dark secret. The pain of realizing the children could have been saved if the earlier deaths had been properly investigated haunted every surviving relative. This case became a grim reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers lie in the most unexpected places, and that the failure to ask difficult questions can lead to catastrophic consequences. The full truth is out. The killer was one of their own, driven by a twisted obsession with her own beauty and status. She sought to eliminate any child who might one day steal her light, systematically murdering them in the most chilling way possible. The pattern is broken, the monster is caged, and the family is left to mourn and rebuild. But this case leaves one haunting question hanging in the air, echoing the narcissistic motive that started it all. If the investigation had never revealed the killer's face and her victims had grown into beautiful women, would the world ever have found out the true price of her vanity?